The Anderson Language and Technology Center at CU Boulder is committed to broadening and deepening cultural understanding. Alltech offers non-credit language classes in person and remotely to everyone year-round. Our flexible and engaging format makes language learning a breeze for anyone. So join a community of like-minded and motivated students who are passionate about traveling and experiencing the world. Jump into our summer session with a 20% discount using the code ALLTECHFUN. Learn more at alltech.colorado.edu.
Hi, my name is Kira Coughlin, and I'm a senior here at CU studying International Affairs and Spanish. Even in these dark times, love has been constant and has been a way for us to connect and come together, even when we physically can't be around one another. This past week, CWA has been posting YouTube videos showcasing CU students' stories on love. In this panel, we will explore these stories further and the student perspective on love, loss, and relationships. Our voices matter, and we couldn't be more thankful for the students who shared their stories and for the theater and dance students who read them aloud. Your personal experience with love shows us that love will always prevail, no matter the circumstance. Thank you, and we hope you enjoy the panel.
Hi, everyone, and welcome. I'm Ty Tashiro. I'm an author and social scientist, and I'll be facilitating the panel tonight. And we have a series of 5 great stories. We'll show some of the clips from those stories and then have a great conversation with 2 of the authors who have been great to join us and hear a little bit about what modern love is like for CU students. So I have a few things to start us out here. Thanks for joining us here for What Matters Most in the Search for Love, Stories of Love, Loss, and Resilience. All the CWA panels are being recorded on YouTube, and they'll be available to watch immediately after each event on the CWA YouTube channel. You can submit questions if you're in the audience at any time during the session through the YouTube chat. And we invite you to share if you're a CU student and to share the location you're joining us from. So the way we'll kind of do the session here is we'll have some short clips from each story, and those will pose some really interesting questions for us to talk about. And then we'll show another clip and just kind of work our way through. When it comes to Sydney and Lily, will get an extra treat because we'll get to talk in depth about their story. So a little bit more about Lily and Sydney. Lily is a sophomore. She's majoring in journalism, minoring in political science from Fort Collins, Colorado. So welcome, Lily. Sydney is a sophomore as well, majoring in PR and media production, and hails from Los Angeles, California. So thanks to both of you for joining, and hopefully we'll get to hear more from you than from me about modern love. I was realizing I'm not modern at all, so we can't wait for your perspectives. The first video we're going to see, I think, sets this up really well, and it's called Love in the Forest, and it poses this really foundational question for us to launch into this panel. So if we can go ahead and take a look at that video to start.
I'm a pretty indecisive person. I guess I always have been. I start thinking about what to cook for dinner when I wake up in the morning because it truly does take me all day to figure it out. Fish tacos, scrambled eggs on an English muffin, coleslaw sandwich. Sometimes I make the best decisions under pressure because at least I'm, well, forced to decide. Today, however, at Rocky Mountain National Park, I'm unsure about a lot. I haven't settled on how to tackle getting downhill, and I don't know how I feel about the person standing next to me. Hiking is a form of meditation for me. I'm able to melt into the silence and the continuous step after step forward. It gives me the mental space to reflect on whatever I need to reflect on that day, and I always leave something in the woods behind me when I finish a hike. Today, mile after mile on this hike, I've been thinking about love. That scares me. I'm looking at the person next to me this entire time thinking, holy shit, I might actually love this guy. And the guy who keeps me grounded when my head is too high in the clouds, the guy that supports my passions and all my craziness that comes along with those passions. The guy that somehow can't get out of bed without tangling himself in the sheets and falling over. The guy who is with me despite my inability to decide what I'm having for dinner. I love him, I think.
Well, I think we've all been there. So maybe not in Rocky Mountain National Park, confused, but I think all of us have had moments where we're standing next to somebody and the question comes up, what do I think about this person? What does this person mean to me? And do I love this person? Which is a pretty hefty question to contemplate. You know, Lily and Sydney, how do the two of you kind of think about that?
Yeah, I thought this piece was super interesting because I kind of agree that there isn't like a threshold or like, way that that you're in love with someone. It kind of just comes. So you never really know. I mean, some people say like, when but it's really hard to determine that. So
yeah, I found that sometimes with married couples, people will ask them, how did you know that this was the one? And they give this unbelievably unhelpful response, which is, you just know, which doesn't really elucidate anything, but it is difficult sometimes. So how do you, when you are in between, I guess, what are some ways that you kind of work through thinking about the process?
I think with where we are now in our lives as sophomores in college, it's really hard to admit that you could possibly feel that way about someone because there's a very, there's a lot of conversation that surrounds it. There's a lot of questions that you don't want to answer at that moment when you say that. So I think it's a very hesitant thing to fully put a label on and be like, I love someone. But I feel like, and this might go for a few people, it might just go for me, but I think there's something there that the person feels more than just someone that you're with, more than just a friend. It's like you are with someone that you couldn't really imagine living life at that moment without. So I think that's part of working through it. Those feelings of like, that could just be someone that I'm very close to, someone that I like talking to, a best friend type feeling, but there's a lot of times more to that than just that feeling. Sure.
Yeah, there's that something extra that's hard to describe, right? And maybe it's different for different people in the way you're attracted, but yeah, there's that something special, that something extra that makes it a unique kind of thing. That's really interesting that maybe if you're a sophomore in college around that age, there's kind of this hesitancy because admitting that you like the person that much is a little bit of a hassle sometimes. Am I hearing that right?
Yeah, no, definitely. It's not the easiest thing to say or feel or accept if you feel it, I don't think at all. In fact, I think most people push it away when they feel it. And a lot of the people that I'm surrounded by, when that conversation comes up, when they've been with someone for a while and you're like, how do you feel about them? It's very much like, we don't need to talk about it right now. Like, it's not the conversation right now. And I get it because it's so scary saying this is how I feel about someone, even though no one is 100% sure about anything, I think. So there's also that fact that if you do say it, and then you're like, well, what if I mess this up? What if I'm wrong about how I feel? And it's just, there's so much pressure to make sure that you know exactly what you're feeling, when in reality, a lot of the times that you feel that, maybe you don't know what you're feeling at all.
Totally. Yeah. Wow. It's you did a great job listing all the weight that comes with this, right? Because there's the personal responsibility. There's kind of this opportunity cost. Like if I'm spending so much emotional energy and thought on this person, like there's other cool things going on in Boulder or at CU that you're maybe missing out on. And yeah. And then it's all confusing on top of that. Now, do y'all think that your generation maybe thinks about these things more than previous generations did, or do you think it's always been this way?
I definitely think so, because just with like dating apps and social media, you're constantly thinking like, is there something better out there? Because you're just surrounded with all these images and, profiles of different people. So you're kind of like, when you're with someone, there's so many more options out there. So it's like, do I want to be with this person or do I not? So that kind of complicates things a lot.
Yeah. And you get this like thing in your pocket that keeps reminding you that there's a seemingly infinite number of swipes for alternative partners.
Yeah. I think there's also just a lot of factors that come with not only where we live, but the place in our lives where we are. Just there's so many things that come along with that, with the social media, with us being in a pandemic and living lives practically by ourselves. And I think a lot of relationships did come out of that because people wanted someone there with them, wanted to go through things with someone, and came out either strong, or it was just a moment in time that they needed someone. But especially with the pandemic, like everybody, a lot of the people our age started using TikTok, which I'm all for new social media. I love it. I loved Vine. I love TikTok. But I think that with that comes unrealistic expectations of what things should be and how they should go and how love looks. And so I think a lot of people left their quarantine, whether in a relationship or not, thinking that they needed that romantic, idealistic, beautiful relationship that they've seen on social media all of quarantine, And so I think with that stuff, it's hard because there are relationships like that, I think, that people genuinely feel like they're in a movie, but you can't really go into something thinking I'm going to make this into my movie, or I'm going to.
Right.
Yeah. But
that's hard, right? Because on Instagram, no one's posting an image of them being bored with their partner, right? No. Or being annoyed with their partner. They're on vacation somewhere, or they're like madly in love with each other. If this makes you all feel better, there's a couple of studies that have come out now, and they've shown that the nauseating kind of couple social media posts, where it's like, I'm so in love with my partner kind of thing, is associated with relationship doubt and relationship instability. So, I think sometimes it's the case too. Couples can feel insecure about how things are going. And that's a nice way to almost convince yourself by posting it that, no, I think we're all right. So, yeah. Well, great. That's there's some great insights. And I'd like to jump to Lily's story now, because this takes us to kind of the next step beyond some of the indecision, where Lily, it sounds like you became quite certain of something at some point. So tell us a little bit about how old you were in this story, and set the scene for us a little bit about where this story takes place.
I was 12. It was between the grades of 6th and 7th grade. And I was in like a play like that summer. And it was just like a bunch of kids from the community. So that's where it happened.
Okay. Yeah. Now there's an annoying boy there. And tell me a little bit about this boy.
Yeah. So before I had like people would say, oh, he's cute. And I just like did not understand. Like, I just did not understand attraction whatsoever. So, and there's this boy and he was super annoying. And for some reason, all of a sudden, like something like switched. And all of a sudden I was like, I get it now. And I don't know what he was because he was extremely annoying, but.
Sometimes, yeah, you begrudgingly have feelings for folks, but I love the story. I love, Lily, how you set a really rich scene at this summer theater program. And then here's this annoying, I can just picture you're 12 years old. I think we all had it, right? Someone who just really annoyed us. And even if we weren't 12 at some point in our life, we've ended up falling for somebody who at first kind of rubbed us the wrong way. So maybe let's watch this clip called July 7th. And this is a little piece of Lily's story.
He looked my way. My stomach turned to a rock and plummeted to my feet. It was like my heart was a lever and he was tugging it, setting my internal organs into a jumbled frenzy, buzzing with an energy that flowed over my chest. It burned. I felt more alive than I ever had been. I understood. He was looking at me. In a room full of people cheering for him, he wanted to see my reaction, mine. I admired him. The world gave him a brilliant hand, and seeing his eyes flash before mine beneath the stage lights, I could see why. He loved something he could never have, and now I understood that I did too. There was something beautiful in that, loving something that you can never have. It's painful, but a pain you can never want to go away. To be sure, it is common for most people to have a crush at 12 years old. At this point in my life, I believe to have had many. My crushes came from teasing gestures from my friends, a deskmate who wasn't obnoxious, and cheap paper hearts on Valentine's Day. But my feelings for Luke weren't inconsequential like that. If anything, they defied circumstance. They defied my own perception. The thing that surprised me the most was that love was an actual physical feeling, an addicting feeling. You feel like you've just been hit, like you're falling, like you're on the verge of death, but you only want more. At that moment, I knew that I would be chasing this feeling for the rest of my life. I sat on my bedroom floor, listening to the radio. Demi Lovato's Heart Attack came on. My heart felt like it was caving in on itself. There it was again, that feeling.
Oh, what a great, it kind of warms your heart to hear all those feelings, and even listening to Demi Lovato there in your room. It's also good. Now, tell us a little bit more about that, Lily, because, you know, you're holding it together right now. You're not distracted. You don't feel like you're falling. You don't feel like you might die, all these different things. What is it about romantic love that hits us that way?
I don't know. And I think my feelings were so amplified, just like feeling that for the very first time and being so young and it basically just took me off guard because I didn't even know, like, you know, people had like a physical feeling. And I think that was kind of, you know, and I think it all comes down to like primal instincts and, you know, like people have to procreate and, you know, find a mate. And I think that's kind of why, but I do think that there is something, you know, deeper to it, especially, I don't know, as we advanced as humans, that kind of, you know, keeps us together and keeps kind of like humanity alive, I guess.
Yeah, it's like this unstoppable force, right, that runs throughout humanity and every now and then runs through each of us. One of the things I love about how you described it was that it's not just purely positive feeling. Like you made me feel like that fear that you sometimes feel when you're having this super positive feeling psychologists call passionate love. It is mixed with other things. Can you tell me a little bit more about that fear and kind of that trepidation?
I think, like, kind of going back to the previous essay, there's kind of like that dread, you know, once you're in, you're kind of in, you know, if you really feel hard for somebody, I feel like it's really hard, you know, it's going to, like, you have the ability to get hurt. And I also think there's a little bit of anxiety associated with it as well, just, having a person have such an impact on your life.
Sure. Yeah. I think there's that loss of control that we all feel, right? And that's just really terrifying, especially when someone's competent and in control of most things in their life, to suddenly feel this emotion that you don't have control over and kind of runs you over. That can be pretty unnerving. They have these great fMRI studies where they image people's brains when they're in love, and it's just a neurological disaster. what's going on up there, and you see just these floods of positive emotion. You see these floods of activity in areas that motivate us to move proximal to somebody. And what I always emphasize in class is that the areas that are associated with cost or kind of reasoned decision making, those actually get a little bit impaired when we're in that state. And I think that's part of the thing that makes us nervous. Sydney, what about you?
Oh, I don't know. I mean, I just think like there is so much anxiety that comes with that feeling in the best way possible. Like it's not a bad thing necessarily, but just the way that we think about and work ourselves up in that way is just so funny to me. It's not really, it's just like a natural response to be like, I don't know what's going on right now, or I don't know why I feel this way or that way. But yeah, I mean, there's so much that comes along with that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Now, both of you are saying that there's some nervousness involved with it. I'm wondering, do you have any friends who we won't name, but do you have any friends who have none of this inhibition? Like it's just full speed ahead.
Yeah, definitely. It's actually funny. This weekend I had this conversation with someone. I know someone that just doesn't, I mean, they care about who they're with, but it's never really attachment. It's just they are okay with going full into something or not going into it at all without really thinking about it. And I was like, I just don't know how that's possible. Like I think maybe I think more than the average person, or I always am thinking as if I'm about to get married practically, like I'm making the biggest decision of my life.
Right.
But I really respect the people that can go full in, because like, who knows if it ends up being something more for them, they went through it so casually. But some people, it's just not a priority right now to really say, I'm, this is what I'm doing and I need to think about it so much and make sure it's the right decision. It's more just like, they'll come to me. Like someone will find me if they need to find me. And I think that's a great mentality if you have that.
Yeah. So it kind of foreign to some of us, right? But you almost have to admire it. Lily, do you see that sometimes where people are just full speed ahead?
Yeah, I mean, I think once you're like feeling that way, like, you feel so reasonable, but from the outside looking in, everyone's like, what are you doing? So I think I see that a lot with my friends. They'll be doing something that I would definitely not do, or I just like don't trust the person that they're with. But, from their perspective, their feelings are so intense that, it's what's right for them, even though, as much as you want to help them like get away from that path, it's kind of what their heart is leading them towards.
Yeah. That can be tough to watch sometimes from the outside, right? When it's gone beyond like some early stage and now you're actually concerned about somebody and their happiness or their long-term well-being. And it's almost impossible. It's been my experience. It's almost impossible to reason with someone when they're in that passionate love stage. Yeah. Well, if you find any way to do it, let me know. I think all of us can make some money off of figuring out how to reason with people in passionate love. Let's take a look at this next story. one of the things that's great about this is it's totally about the pandemic. So I'm sure most of us are ready to forget about 2020, but there have been some wonderful things that have occurred over the past year during these uncertain times and a tough year. Some people have found things that are meaningful and important, and this story is a good example. So let's take a look at My Masked Love.
I fell for that so long before we ever even got within 6 feet of each other. We must have been on 5 or 6 dates before he got up the nerve to ask if we had to social distance from each other. We were on a hike and had somehow lost the trail. Now alone in the middle of the woods, away from the eyes of others who might judge us for standing too close, we dared to hold hands, feeling the excitement of the warmth of our fingers interlaced for the first time, weeks into our relationship. We wandered around hand in hand, not wanting to let go even when our hands had become sweaty and gross. We had fantasized about this moment for far too long, and neither of us wanted it to end. Unsure of which way to turn to find the trail, we paused. He stepped closer to me. Slowly, he pulled down my mask. Time stood still. We had sent each other dozens of kiss emojis, but the real thing was different. There was no denying the danger in taking off our masks and locking lips, but my God, was it worth it? As the pandemic continued, he stayed by my side, the one person I could always trust and always see no matter the restrictions. It became us against the world. Time and time again, I saw him make choices to protect others over himself, whether it was saying no to social plans I knew he desperately wanted to go to, or picking up trash along the hiking trail. There were so many times in which he helped nameless strangers without even pausing to think twice about it.
And by the way, thanks so much to the students who performed all these stories. What a wonderful job everybody did. And I should mention about this student's story, they were super safe about everything, way safer than anybody I knew during the pandemic. So for this moment to happen was quite a big deal, and an exercise in patience. I guess maybe let's start. I'm just curious, if you're 19, 20 years old and there's 2020 that comes along, what has that been like for your friends and your peers during this past year regarding their love lives?
I feel like everyone's permanently in what's known as the talking stage, where you're like texting or Snapchatting and, you're like might go out, and I don't know, I feel like the pandemic, like I'm sure everyone's guilty of this, but, canceling plans, being like, oh, like, I want to be safe. So I feel like it's held a lot of people back kind of from like, making those relationships and meeting up with people like in real life. So I think in a lot of ways, a lot of like kind of our flirting and stuff has been through like an online platform, which has definitely changed a lot of ways that people, kind of build relationships.
Yeah, it almost reminds me of like the old school writing letters to one another with your quill and ink there. But do you think that's been what's your opinion about that, Lily? Do you think that's been a good thing, that things have been that way, or has it just been simply frustrating and kind of sucks?
I think in some ways it's been kind of good because, with dating apps, there's a lot of hookup culture, which is, good for some people, but for a lot of people who actually want to get into a serious relationship, it's really hard to find somebody that's looking for the same thing. And yeah, like I said, with dating apps, there's always someone new you can talk to and meet up with. So I guess this is kind of like allowed, since you can't like physically be there with somebody, it's kind of allowed for relationships to maybe almost have a little bit more depth from these kind of dating apps and social media platforms and all of that.
Yeah. Huh. Interesting. Sydney, what's been your observation about dating life for your peers over the past year?
It's definitely been an up and down thing. There's a lot of new people coming in and out of our lives, which has been fun. But I think that there's just this overall notion of like how long things are gonna last right now. And everybody knows that kind of when they're talking to someone or getting into it. That's always like one of the first topics is how long do you think it'll last? Or, how long have you guys been talking? But on this topic, I do feel a little bit hypocritical because a lot of my friends had a very hard time over this period with meeting people, talking to people. And for me, it was very much the opposite. From the moment that we left Boulder and got, told to go home, I met someone and had my first real experience of I love someone. And so with that, it was like I felt almost guilty being the person that for the first time around my friends like had someone and they didn't, because a lot of people were very, very miserable. Like, how am I supposed to meet someone? How are we supposed to go out right now? How are we supposed to do this? And so, a lot of that conversation was really hard for me to try to be like, no, it's fine. Like, you are going to meet someone, like you will when this is all over. I don't know when that is, but like, so it was a lot of like, I just felt so guilty talking to my friends about that topic because it was like, I don't really know what to say right now. Like, I got lucky with this. I really did. Whereas a lot of people, all of quarantine were like, I need someone. I don't know where to find someone. We can't go back to school for months. And so it was hard for them, I think, mentally, emotionally, just trying to be okay with the fact that they weren't going to be able to meet someone for a while or at least create that like foundational relationship with someone.
Yeah, well, I say good for you.
I would have to agree. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you were lucky, but that's great, and it sounds like it's been a really meaningful kind of thing. So that's wonderful. Like, I'm happy for you, but it's nice of you to feel bad, I guess for your friends, but no, that's awesome. And it's just like a student who wrote the story. She didn't expect to find love in the pandemic, but it just kind of happened. Now I'm wondering for whether it's you, Sydney, or just friends with both of yours, for people who have started relationships during the past year, have you noticed that there's anything different about those relationships qualitatively, or is it just kind of the same?
Yeah, no, definitely. So the happy part of that story is I did meet someone. I did fall in love with someone and I had a great relationship with that person. But once things start to come back to reality outside of that bubble of what you go through, I think that there's just a lot that people have missed. And at least in my case, I don't know about for everyone, but I've heard quite a few people, I've had this conversation with them about breakups that they've gone through. It's one of those things where when you're inside a bubble with someone, it feels amazing and it feels like it can never end. And as soon as that bubble is popped and you are completely involved in their lives or in a completely different environment that you built your relationship, things definitely start to feel very claustrophobic and very much like, oh, okay, so we did this for the past few months. Now things are completely changing. And like, how do we evolve to that? Yeah. So I think, there's a lot of changes going on in people's lives. And I think a lot of relationships, if they're very strong, they make it through those changes. And that's amazing for them. And if not, then you had your bubble and it was amazing. But I think that part of the relationship is hard right now, specifically with people. It's just change feels so abnormal because we've been stuck in the same place for the past 6 months.
Sure.
That it's like you don't really know what to do with those changes. And especially going through them with someone is like, how do I adapt with the person?
Yeah, it's hard enough. It's going through our changes in our life, right? Much less with a serious relationship where it's been so unusual, right? For the life of that relationship. So I hadn't even thought about that. Because I just thought, well, things must have been strange in 2020, but I haven't thought about just all the strain that this transition we're going through right now is going to put on relationships. So, yeah. Well, anything else on pandemic love, I guess, before we move to the next story?
Yeah, I guess it's kind of perfect to be in a relationship like at the very start of the pandemic, because you don't have to physically be anywhere. So if you want to spend like 24 hours with your partner, you could. But as things open back up, you are like introduced to a whole new world of, schedules and other relationships. So I feel like it is hard for some of the relationships to survive.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That's a great point, because it's almost like you were protected by the bubble in a metaphorical and kind of real way, right? I think one of the things that social psychologists have found this, I always find interesting, is that people rarely see how social stresses and environmental stresses impact their relationship. They might think about what their partner's doing wrong, or they might think about how they're miscommunicating, but we don't always think like, oh, my partner's friend is really annoying. And that's actually impacting our relationship in a negative way. Or, my parents can't stand my partner. That's obviously a stressful kind of situation, but sometimes we overlook it. I guess now it's this interesting natural experiment where all of a sudden these forces are kind of collapsing on relationships formed during the pandemic. And it could probably be pretty challenging. Interesting. Well, we'll see what happens 2021, right? For everybody. Some people think it's gonna be like the roaring 20s. We'll see if that's true or not.
I think we need a roaring 20s after this.
Yeah, that's what I say. I was speaking to a group of students at a conservative Christian school the other day, and I went along, I followed that line of reasoning out further than I should have, probably given my audience, but we'll see. We'll see what happens. But I do think it's been nice, that notion of the quality communication and quality time. And Lily, you brought up the idea of focus and how it's hard to focus with the apps and the social media and all that noise kind of going on. So I think regardless, hopefully we've all learned a bit about the importance of quality time and creating that space for a relationship to grow. And this next story, I love the honesty of it, and it's a young woman whose father, who was really jovial and just kind of a jokester and everything, has a serious car accident and has not been the same since. And I'll just read a little excerpt here. Referring to her dad, the distance runner, the social butterfly, the jokester of our family, suddenly turned into a mess of anger and later depression. And even when he makes my mom feel unappreciated, even when he yells at my brother, even when he calls me a bitch, I still need to love him, which is really a remarkable statement to end that paragraph. But let's hear some more about this story. Just listen.
I've been told that when you're grieving, the happy memories hurt more than the sad ones. This statement is true. I remember a 5th grade graduation when he called Alicia in a deep voice as I was walking across the stage, and I got all flustered. I remember his goofy imitations of my dance moves after a recital, the soothing way he stroked my forehead before I fell asleep as a child, and his silly April Fool's tricks, like sticking plastic wrap across a doorway and summoning us groggy kids to run right into it. I remember listening to him sing along to John Mayer on 97.3 KBCO with the windows down on a summer night. I remember kickball games and Super Bowl parties and AFB watch nights and how he used to love to cook tilapia. The mischievous look he got in his eyes before he played a prank, his childlike wonder, the way he could charm anyone with a quick conversation, how he teased us all constantly, but always from a place of love. The ski days, Stinson beach getaways, sand pits, and summer barbecues, the smell of his old shampoo. Should love be based on our current understanding of a person or our memory of who they have been? Loving a past version of my dad feels like a lie, but loving him as he is now feels impossible. Maybe we don't have to choose. Maybe it's just enough to accept all of someone, their rough edges, little charms, and deepest flaws, within the cacophony of their souls, even if we cannot yet love them. Maybe it's enough to just listen.
There's so many things to talk about with this story, but I think one of the things that's highlighted is this notion of how we handle the flaws that people have that we love, how we handle what can be really long stretches of tough times for people we love. I don't know, Sydney and Lily, do you have any thoughts about how one should navigate those kinds of conundrums?
I mean, I kind of believe the idea that once you love somebody, you never really stop. You know, once you feel a certain way for somebody, and I'm sure it's different with like parental relationships and romantic relationships, but once you feel a certain way for somebody, you know, you can't ever really forget that. So like no matter what happens in that relationship, you'll always have, you know, those emotions somewhere inside of you. And I guess it's kind of comforting, you know, if someone acted one way or was once one way in the past, you kind of always know that there's like, they always have that part of them, even though, you know, things have changed.
Yeah, I think that's a great perspective to take.
Yeah. No, I would say that's definitely one of the scariest parts about saying you may actually be in love. Because the only thing that I feel like I've learned is not the only thing. I've learned a lot throughout the experiences, but one of the main points I've come out with is no matter how much that person changes, no matter how much they hurt you, you hurt them, there's always going to be a piece of you once you love them that they're always going to have a little piece of you. And it does suck because there are some choices that people make after relationships that just don't really go along with their character. You don't really recognize them maybe. But even at the end, you're like, there's no real way to change my view on this person. You kind of view them in like an angel light.
Yeah, right. As torturous as that might be.
Yeah, as torturous as that may be.
Right. Yeah, it's tough in romantic relationships, right? Because theoretically you could just totally forget about this person, but you're right. It is tough. It's stubbornly and indelibly stick in your mind, and for better or for worse. Yeah, I think one of the interesting things that happened to me when I was at CU, I guess I was a junior. We went to my buddy's visited his grandparents in their senior citizen home, and they had been married for over 50 years. They were just the most adorable couple you could imagine. It seemed like the happiest couple ever, and my friend told me as much. And somehow we started talking about our love lives. You know, it's totally different generations when we started talking about it. And I'll never forget, his grandma said, "Well, you know, Kastai, there are the tough years." And I stopped her and I said, "Wait, did you just say years plural?" And I'm like 20 years old. And she just kind of chuckled. She said, "Yeah, you have bad years plural sometimes." I just remember that was a revelation to me that could be the case, and raised the question of, so what? How do you endure that? You know, how do you handle that and remain loyal to somebody? There's a romantic situation, I think, with family, like we saw in this beautiful story. Boy, it's even tougher to let go of family. I feel like, and someone like your father. So, yeah. Well, any other? I'm going to run out of time for questions here because we're talking so much. I'm so interested in all of this. But any other comments before we go to the last story here? Okay. Well, I think we know the person who wrote this story. So, Sydney, this is a great metaphorical tale, and it starts out with you and your twin, right?
Yes, my twin.
And a car. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so I am a twin. We are fraternal. But we pretty much shared a lot of stuff our whole life. And on a few weeks before our 16th birthday, we got separate cars, which was crazy to me because my whole life had been lived with her. So it was like, oh, I can go do things like completely on my own now. No one has to know about them. Like I got a free ride right now. But yeah, so we got these two separate cars and I was so excited. And it turns out that this car that I had throughout most the end of my high school and into college just became like this human to me. Like it saw everything that I went through, and it just was always there, like right when I needed it. And so yeah, I had a lot of the stories that I learned about love and learned about how we appreciate things in our life came through this car and inside of it and the conversations inside of it.
Yeah, the car had a name, right?
Yes, the car had a name. The car's name was June. My grandpa was my best friend of my whole life. He still is. But he passed away in 2014. And when we got our cars in 2016, me and my sister were like, they need some really good names. And my grandpa was obsessed with Johnny Cash and June Carter. So we did mine June and hers was Johnny, and they were married in the driveway. Yeah, and we would drive them down the canyon together and call each other and be like, June's having a tough time. We should probably pull over to the fruit stand right now. But yeah.
That's great.
Yeah.
That's a great little nugget that was not in the original story.
I know. There was so much I wish I could have included in that story, but yeah.
That's excellent. Well, one of the things I told Sydney after I'd read the story was that June had so much come to life for me that I wanted to be friends with June, because it was kind of the perfect friend in a lot of ways. Let's hear a little clip of the places we'll go and hear a little bit about your rides with June.
All I could think was how many memories and emotions have drifted through this interior, and the amount of storms and curbs we have been thrown. The long night, can we talk conversations and the places we have gone my mother would have never wanted to know about, all done with you. Every long distance up and down the coast, every backseat laugh you have kept in your cushions for a rainy day. Every road rage comment and quiet night on a random road, keeping me warm and safe. In the driver's seat, I came out as bisexual to all my friends, and who knows how many secrets you would never tell. In your back seat, I fell in love with the girl that the songs sing about through your speakers. And then clenching your leather, I heard her tell me she didn't really love me quite that much anymore. The tears, the dry heaving, the silent screams, the playback of memories on my eyelids. Through it all, though, June was the one cradling me at the end of the day. June got me through most days. Even when everything around me was crumbling and when I had no idea who I was, she was always there ready to get away, no questions asked. She helped me understand and trust who I was. She helped me venture to find pieces of myself I never knew existed. I was always on the go and always offered her to be the carrier of the crew. June endured all my insanity and heart-wrenching moments, but also all of my highest highs. I never thought I would be the person to care so much about an object. But she's not just an object. June and I have been through every situation. Driving the canyon, I couldn't help but think in a few months I would be preparing to leave every piece of comfort I had ever known. For the first time in my life, I had built up all this confidence, figured myself out, but it didn't matter because soon enough I would be in a different state without June and a security blanket.
So we leave off in that clip. You're going to be without June. Sounds terrifying to all of us. What was happening?
Yeah. Well, at the time, I personally hate change. I am not someone for change. I, as a kid, would freak out about anything that was going to change. So coming to college was not the most ideal thing mentally for me. It was quite a roller coaster. But knowing that I would not have something so familiar to me, even when I was in a very unfamiliar place, was really like alarming to me. And so, yeah, a lot of the things that I felt like I was leaving behind, I thought like would just disappear from my life and would not really mean as much to me because they weren't with me here. And it scared me. I was like, I don't want to make new connections. I don't want to have new things that I love, new people that I love. And so, yeah, it was definitely terrifying.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, that's totally natural, I think, to feel that way, you know. Now, have your fears turned out to be true? I mean, you were afraid that because these things weren't with you, that you would lose them in some way, or lose the what they had taught you.
Mm-hmm. So now, it's quite ironic. Today, where I am in my life, I feel like Boulder is my home. You know, even when I go home, I love home and home is home. But whenever I say I'm going home, I'm going to Boulder. And I feel very comfortable in my skin, in the place that I'm in my life, my body, the people that I talk to. And so I think now looking back on it, leaving things behind is hard. It's one of the hardest things to do, but there is so much that is in front of you when you're headed somewhere new that you just need to remember, like, those things aren't leaving. The second that I got home from being away for the first time, it was like everything was right there waiting for me. And I don't think I really registered that when I was leaving. I don't think I put it into perspective that nothing was genuinely leaving me, except the ironic part is I was so scared about losing things in my life, all of my life. I have been so scared just with people, with my car, everything. I'm like, what if I lose it? And so when I originally wrote this essay freshman year for a writing class, and I don't know if he's watching, but Nathan Pipolo was my teacher and he encouraged me to submit this essay. But he pushed us to write about it and I wrote all about it. And I re-edited it when we met and talked about it. And when I re-edited it, about a few weeks before, I got T-boned in June. And I literally sat in the seat and I laughed because I was just like, you really are so worried about losing things and you're so worried about things happening, but you really have no control. And I was like, it's a car. And as much as you love her and as much as you have your whole heart in this car and all the memories attached to it, there really isn't anything that you can do once that is gone. And so it just kind of made me check myself, like, you're allowed to get attached to things and you're allowed to love things, but you cannot convince yourself that they are going to be in your life forever. That's not how I can live, because it's just things get taken away sometimes, and it happens.
What an amazing existential lesson. June getting T-boned. You're much more deep than me. I would have worried about my insurance or something, but
I wish that I could say that was just for the story, but that part was not for the story.
Well, I love that, and we have a couple questions here I want to get to, but one of the things about all of these stories, I think, is that people reflected on relationships, current or past, and it was just so cool for me, and I felt so privileged to be able to take part in sharing those stories with you all, and to hear how something from when you were 12 years old, for example, right, had really shaped you and been formative in such a great way, or how June provided like the secure attachment figure is how I thought about it, right?
Mhm.
And allowed you to grow in a way that felt safe and secure. So anyways, before we get these questions, let me just say thank you to the two of you for your stories and obviously being here tonight. But for all of our authors and performers, this has really been an inspirational kind of thing for me. So thank you. Well, we have a student question here. Let's see. What do you do when you feel like a relationship is ending, but you still love them? Good question. So what do you do when you feel like a relationship is ending, but you still love them?
Yeah, that's hard. I went through a similar thing about a few months ago. I think when you start to realize someone is slipping away, it's very emotionally draining, and you try to compensate for the fact that you think that you didn't do enough, or that they need to just realize how much they like you. And I think that honestly, I hate to say it, but with the people that I know and with the generation that we're in, a lot of times space gives people the time to realize that they wouldn't really want to do things without you. And pushing that more of being like, no, you need me, like, and I need you too, and we both love each other, sometimes makes it feel a little bit like, oh, well, this is claustrophobic, like I don't know what to do here. So I would say in my opinion, it's space a lot of times that really makes people realize what they want.
Yeah, that's a good insight. Although the impulse is to just like grab on.
Yeah. Oh, of course. And the social
Lily,
media posts, you just want to comment
Right.
and like them and text back right away. But
right.
yeah.
Lily, what about you? Do you have any?
I mean, I think, you have to put it in perspective. Like, people are always going to be coming in and out of your life. And, like Sydney was talking about in her story, that you can't really control what happens. And that's a sad thing. So I don't know. I've never really been in that situation, but I guess you just have to sort of, as much as it's hard, to embrace that change and move on.
Also, one more thing on that, I will say a very good takeaway that I've learned this year is always put yourself first. Know what you want before they get to even decide what they want, because sometimes at the end of the day, it's just the idea of you guys not being together that is driving you to want it to work so bad, when in reality, maybe you would enjoy being free for a second.
Sometimes you're surprised.
Sometimes you are surprised.
how that works out. So let's do a rapid fire on this one, maybe because we have like a minute left here. So Sydney and Lily, my Buff alum daughter from 2018, and I talk a lot, and I enjoy hearing about her love life. How do you feel about your parents' involvement or advice? Now, if you're going to get in trouble with your parents, you don't have to you don't have to say anything. But if you feel like answering, we'd love to hear.
This is awkward because I think my parents are actually watching this. But I honestly don't really talk to anybody about my love life, even my closest friends, because I feel like once I like vocalize something, it becomes real. So I don't know. It just stresses me out, honestly, to like talk about it.
I feel you. Almost it doubles the pressure in some ways sometimes. Yeah.
I agree with that. It's really hard to tell everyone about things. As excited as you are about meeting someone new or whatever, it's hard to express that. I think with my parents, it was a little different because I didn't come out until my senior year, and I didn't want to tell them for a very long time. And so it's still a conversation that's developing. It's still a conversation that we have every now and then, that I try to work in and have conversations just casual with them about it. So it's a work in progress, but I think having a parent or an adult figure that really does genuinely care about how you feel and how you think of love, like kids, us teens, adults, young adults, like we love this. This is a great topic. Like when it's good, it's good, and we
Oh,
would
yeah,
love to
yeah.
talk about it. But it is hard
Sure.
to start that conversation.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, I guess it's different for different families, probably. And one thing that I've just observed as an outsider, as a psychologist, sometimes is that sometimes the young adult acts like they don't enjoy talking about it, but sometimes they do. Sometimes they're actually getting driven up the wall by it, but sometimes these things sink in later, sometimes reluctantly, but they will. So, well, hey, Lily, Sydney, thank you so much for joining us tonight and for your insights. What a delight this has been. I've been hanging on the edge of my seat here for so many of these things we were talking about, and thank you to all of our student authors who, as we all heard tonight, really wrote some brave pieces, some very personal pieces that were touching and enlightened us in, I think, important ways, and led some important conversations for all of us. I think I just have a couple things I'm supposed to read here before we go. So thanks for all of you who participated. Thanks to all the audience who tuned in tonight. We appreciate your support. CWA relies on the generosity of people like you in the audience to make this event possible. So please consider making a gift to CWA, which can also be done on the CWA website, colorado.edu/CWA. And you can tune in to other panels through Sunday, April 11th, and find all of that on the CWA YouTube channel. So, hey, thanks again, everybody, and what a fun night talking about modern love. Good night, everybody.